Good morning, everyone, and welcome to RSD Amsterdam. If you're still standing, don't worry about it. Come take a seat. It's possible that people are still arriving, so feel very welcome, everyone. We're here today in Pakhuis de Zwijger, and there are RSD events happening all over the world this month. Our focus here today will be on a sustainable and circular society and a healthy and vital citizenry. I'm Gillian Grave. I'm your host today and tomorrow. And I'm very excited to see who we've got in here today. Are you excited? Are you excited? There we go. Let's see how international we are. Who here is not Dutch? Oh, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Let's have a look at who we've got. Good morning. Who are you and why are you here?
Are teachers from a university in Denmark called Zeeland, and we actually research in systemic design thinking. Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Welcome. Who else is here from far away, outside of Amsterdam, let's say? Okay. To Amsterdam, people outside of the ring is foreign. Hi, who are you and what are you looking forward to today?
Hi, my name's Aish. I've come here from Frankfurt, Germany, and I've been following the conference for a few years now, so it's just, well, it's closer than when it was ever before, so why not? Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, welcome. One more person, maybe a Dutch person for a change. Who here is Dutch? Oh, very shy Dutch people. That's rare. Very rare. Okay, what about you? You're already writing stuff down. That's very interesting. Who are you and what would you like to learn today?
My name's Kira and I'm actually studying at the Haagse Hogeschool. And my teacher, my sustainability and minor teacher said, oh my God, do this, it's so interesting. So I'm here.
Oh, brilliant. I'm very happy to have you. All right, so like I said, we're here in Pakhuis de Zwijger, who is our partner for this event. We're very happy to be here with them. A special shout out to their man, Volker Lodewijks, who's making all of this possible. He's giving us a wave. And this event is also all happening thanks to the efforts of the Expertise Network Systemic Codesign, also known as ESC. Their chair is Wina Smeenk and their program manager is Frank Evers, and I'd like to invite you both on stage. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Wina, would you be so kind to introduce yourself and talk to us about how come we're here with such a big group of systemic co-designers?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm excited as well, so very happy to see you all here. I'm the chair of the Expertise Network Systemic Codesign. We also call it ESCAPE instead of the 3 letters. And we want to escape from all the problems and the societal challenges that we have, and we want to do that with systemic codesign. Next to that, I'm a professor at the Applied University of in Holland, and like 1.5 years ago, we got a grant to set up this expertise network. And we did this with 4 applied universities, and you can see them over there. So that's the Applied University of in Holland, The Hague. You're here. Wonderful. The Applied University of Utrecht and the Applied University of Rotterdam. And then we have a special guest, and that's Northumbria University. So we are working together, and our program team set up this whole meeting, so I'm very proud of them. And not all professors are in yet, so I might introduce them at another moment today. Yeah.
Brilliant. And can you talk to us a little bit about the history of ESC?
The history? Yeah, it's a short history. It's only 1.5 years. So I think we started with these professorships, and together we decided that we want to join forces. And we want to join forces to kind of find out what systemic co-design can mean, because we know what co-design is, and I think we know what system thinking is, and we might know what systemic perspectives are of psychology in a way. And of course, we also know how to work maybe in networks and in ecosystems. But how to bring this all together? That's our quest, I think, for the coming, well, it was 8 years minus 1.5. It's a bit more than 6 years to find out what this can be. And I think it's wonderful that we have this chance to do that with 4 applied universities in the Netherlands. And we also join forces with the partners that we have, so our working field partners. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Frank, you're the program manager. Can you talk to us about why this event is so important for ESC?
Yeah, sure. And also on behalf of the program team, a very warm welcome to everybody here. And we are very excited also. Yeah, the program team, there are indeed 9 professors that want to work together, but that only can happen when we have a program team organizing things like this. Because when I talk to the professors, all they say is, we want to learn together, we want to explore, we want to do some new research, new projects, we want to get know other initiatives from in the Netherlands. And then you have to organize things. And so we were on a roll with the program team. And then about half a year ago, the request from RSD organization came. We do want to organize a global setup, because why should everybody take a plane to the United States when we can come together all over the world? So we picked up this chance and said, well, we are going to do this. And we are going to set with our partner Pakhuis an environment when we can exchange all our experiences and our enthusiasm about systemic co-design. And I really also would like to mention our program team, which is Emma, who has been working incredibly hard on the communication team. And Natalie and Emma, who all made all the visuals and all those kind of things. We have in our program team research to be done, because we are still exploring what is systemic co-design. And therefore we have researchers, we have Justine, we have Marieke, we have Joep, and not present here, Petra, who are working on a framework for systemic co-design. It's all we want to explore and to investigate together with. Yay! Give them a round. Yes. And that's why these events are so important. That we create our own learning space, and that's why we're here.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a seat. So now that before we kick off with the first keynote speaker of today, there's a couple of things that are important to know. If you thought this event is 2 days, you're wrong. Sorry, but you are wrong. We've got Thursday as well. Thursday, we'll look back at what we did today and tomorrow, and we'll do some systemic reflection exercises. This won't take place here in Pakhuis, but in Dutch nature. Now, if you're scared to leave the city, like a lot of Amsterdam people are, and you're scared of venturing out into Dutch nature, don't be, because there will be a bus Thursday morning that will take you to the right place. And if you'd like more information about this and you don't have a ticket yet, or you do have a ticket, you can talk to Marieke Zielhuis. Where are you? Yeah, over there. Can chat with her. Also good to know, if you're feeling very photogenic today, that's great. This is your time to shine, because we've got a photographer, we've got a videographer, Soya, and we've also got a live stream. So if you are feeling okay with that, that's brilliant. If you're not feeling very photogenic, or if you're a spy or whatever, you can just let them know during the break, and they will take that into account and not film and photograph you. All right, on to our first keynote speaker of today, Joyeeta Gupta. She's an author and full professor of environment and development in the Global South at the University of Amsterdam and IHE Delft Institute for Water Education. She's the 2023 winner of the Spinoza Prize. That's the highest prize in the Netherlands for academic work. The Dutch Nobel Prize, you could say. She's currently co-chair of the Earth Commission, which was set up by Future Earth. She's a member of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, and she's an agenda contributor to Davos 2023. Today she'll talk to us about sustainable development through discourses on integration, coherence, and mainstreaming. Please give her a very warm welcome, Joyeeta Gupta.
actually, that topic is sort of implicit in my presentation, and my presentation will be much more focused on the fact that governance of environmental and sustainable issues is likely to be fragmented. And if it is going to be fragmented and incapable of dealing with systemic problems, then we need something like a global constitution to ensure that these challenges raised by this fragmented governance space will not create problems. So that's basically what I'm going to talk about. So I have a number of messages for today. The first message is that we need to govern within safe and just Earth system boundaries. When we are governing, we can use at the global level environmental treaties or other alternative approaches like resolutions and declarations at the global level. However, these will most likely be fragmented. The third point I'm trying to talk about is that if you talk about social goals, then let's take one of them, meeting minimum needs of people. If you want to meet the minimum needs of people in the year 2019, so 3 years ago, when you can assume that everything else is constant, then you would cross all these boundaries unless you had transformed the Earth. So if we talk about the SDGs and we say, let's ensure that everybody has access to food and water, you can't do that unless you yourself are willing to live in a transformed world. I'll explain that. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the way the SDGs are formulated is only half the story. And I'll try to go a little bit further into trying to explain to you why, even though we have more and more systemic knowledge, at the global level we will have only fragmented governance, and therefore why we need a global constitution and how this could build on the Earth system justice approach. So if you look at the Earth system, we basically have around 5 systems. We have a water system, a biosphere system, a climate system, we have nutrients, and we have an atmospheric system. So if these are your basic systems, then how do these systems function, and beyond what level will these systems start to collapse? So we try to identify within the Earth Commission what would be the safe boundaries for each of these systems. And we go beyond the planetary boundaries discussion because we don't only look at it at global level, we also look at it local level. So, for example, let's look at safe boundaries. So what happened in our analysis is that we divided water into 2 boundaries, one for surface, one for groundwater, and since then we also have a green water boundary. We just divided biosphere into 2. One is intact nature, and the other one is with respect to managed land. And then we had one for climate, but we also divided nutrients into 2, phosphorus and nitrogen. I'm not going to bore you with all the numbers, but let me give you an example of the issue of biosphere. So on the one hand, we feel that in order to ensure biospheric stability, we need between 50 to 60% of the Earth protected for intact nature. And we could do it with 50% if the currently very rich areas of biodiversity are protected. But if those areas become less and less protected, we need to go up to 60% because the rest of the world is less efficient in terms of the amount of biodiversity they have. Now, a lot of people from the social sciences will argue that this is unjust. And they will argue that this is unjust because it will force people out of these areas. I'll come back to that later. We also have an additional boundary for managed areas. Now, managed lands are cities and farms. In each square kilometer of managed land, we think it's very important to reserve 20 to 25% for nature. And this means you could, for example, have a park in a city, or you could have each school or each hospital having 25% reserved for nature, or the roads reserve areas for nature. But the idea is that human beings need nature for their mental health, but also earthworms and bees can only fly a small distance. So for that reason, that is the proposal. We also say, for example, on groundwater, you should not take out more groundwater than gets automatically refilled by rainfall. And in terms of surface water, we think that the surface water should not deviate more than 20% every month with respect to the baseline. So this would enable other ecosystems to flourish. So this gives you an idea of some of the safe boundaries. But the question is, are these boundaries also just? So if you look at the climate change boundary, it was at 1.5, because beyond 1.5, you can trigger 4 irreversible elements, 4 tipping points, which will lead the climate system to go off balance. But is that just? Because already today, at 1.1 degree, we are finding that more than tens of millions of people are getting harmed. So therefore, we try to look at what is a just boundary in terms of how do we minimize harm to people worldwide. So to give you back the example of climate change, if you take 1.5, which is a safe boundary, and which is actually the lower limit in the Paris Agreement boundary, you'll find that you're already causing significant harm to 200 to 500 million people. And who decided that it's okay to cause harm to 200 to 500 million people? If you go back to 1 degree, we could not even find data of the impacts from sea level rise because that hasn't been researched. But at 1 degree centigrade, you can find that the wet bulb temperature is so high that tens of millions of people will be exposed to very high temperatures, which could lead to death. And so for that reason, we chose 1 degree as a more just target than 1.5. It doesn't mean that we want a new negotiation on this. It means we mustn't miss the 1.5 degree target. But still, the message I'm trying to give you is that in terms of science, people were told that we shouldn't talk about justice because justice is normative, it's not scientific. And so therefore, we were able to completely ignore the numbers of people that die or the number of species that disappear. And this is completely, in my view, quite ridiculous. It's quite unfair, especially to the people who are dying. So from that perspective, I'm very, very happy that the Spinoza Prize lets me work on this justice issue and claim that justice is a very important part of science. So therefore, we proposed 1 degree, and this proposal was also accepted in a Nature paper. So now we have our just boundaries. And in most areas, we were willing to accept for the time being that the safe boundaries are also just. But for example, in relation to nitrogen, nitrogen pollution causes eutrophication. But the water becomes so polluted that it's very difficult to actually clean it up for drinking water purposes. And so we made the nitrogen target a little bit more stringent. And when we talk about air pollution, at the global level, we are not crossing the boundary, but at the local level, 7 million people die worldwide. So how do we link these issues together? We try to find a way to link the local air pollution with the global air pollution target, and our just target is a little bit more stringent. So if you look at this diagram, if you are in the green area, you're in the safe and just area. The red targets are the safe areas and the blue areas are just. And basically what you see from this is that the natural scientists have focused on when does the system become unstable, but they have not looked at when does it become unjust. When do people die or get irreversibly impacted by, for example, losing their homes. So these are our boundaries. And then the question is, are we inside these boundaries or are we outside these boundaries? And what you can see over here is that all the boundaries have been breached. The yellow dots indicate where we are with respect to the boundaries. And the only one we have not breached at global level is the aerosol pollution boundary. But otherwise, everything has been breached at the global level. And that is quite frightening because it basically tells us that we are really outside and we are in a state of emergency with respect to all these systems. And what we have not yet done today is to look at how does climate change impact, biosphere impact, aerosols impact, nutrients impact, groundwater. That relationship we have not yet studied. Nobody has studied that up till now. So we're trying to take a systemic perspective, but this is not so easy. If you look at the local level, and this is where we really go beyond the planetary boundary story, you can see that we have crossed at least 2 boundaries of the Earth in all the areas that are yellow to red. If it is red, very dark red, it is 7 boundaries have been crossed. So half the world has crossed these boundaries, affecting almost 90% of the global population. So it's quite serious. And this only comes out when you really take a justice approach to these issues. So the question is, how can we live within these safe and just Earth system boundaries? Several years ago, I was part of a team of scholars who were trying to look at how do we create a more integrated system of governance at the global level. And we came up with a whole list of proposals, and we analyzed the pros and cons. I'm not going to discuss those, but what I'm going to take up is a few examples. So whether you take, let's take environmental issues, and we just take the issue of forests. If you look at the issue of forests from 1940 to 2010, the global level and the regional level, you find that there are so many different actors involved in governing forests. And it's a very, very scattered space. It's very difficult to get a truly systemic understanding of forests, and also to link forests with climate change, water, etc. I'm probably sure that many of you have heard of net zero. And because of this whole movement towards net zero, a lot of people are trying to plant trees. So we have the Great African Wall, the Saharan Wall of trees that is going to be planted. We're having all these projects for massive tree planting in different parts of the world. One of my PhDs, Sophie, has been looking at whether these plantations, these forest ideas, have actually taken into account whether there is water available to make these trees grow. And none of them have actually looked at the water availability. And so that's quite worrying. But basically, if you look at just simply forest governance, it's really scattered. And if you look at it in terms of the different services that these systems provide, or nature's contributions to people, but today I'm looking at in terms of regulating services, provisioning, supporting, and cultural. For those who you don't understand, provisioning services are like the apple you can pluck from a tree. Supporting services and regulating services help in different ways. Supporting services enable, for example, carbon sequestration. Regulating services enable, for example, soil conservation. And these different services are provided by forests, but also you have cultural services. People like to go to forests, people live in forests, people pray to trees, etc. But even if you look at this, you see that at the global level, so many different institutions are involved. And there's a very complex story in this. And this barely covers one of the various issues in terms of environmental governance. If you take water governance, that's also extremely complicated. We have the General Assembly resolutions on the human right to water and sanitation. We have 3 global conventions, but we also have almost 800 treaties between countries on water. And then we have an alphabet soup of UN agencies working on water. Plus, we have all the non-UN agencies. We have the World Water Council, the World Water Forum, industry, social movements, NGOs, scientific communities, and we have the UN water partners. We have a whole lot of lobbying and advocacy taking place between these various groups, litigation, and then there's the market. It's so complicated. Where do you start to create a systemic governance system? How do you do co-governance at this scale? Very, very difficult. And also that depends a little bit on who has the power to do various things. And so from my perspective, I think that if you're trying to do this at global level, it's not that easy. So I think fragmented governance is inevitable, and therefore we need a global constitution. Now, let's go to the Sustainable Development Goals. You're all familiar with it, and basically we have 17 goals at the global level, and these were co-designed. I remember at one point, there was a small little meeting in New York City, and they were trying to ask various scholars, businesses, etc., to sit together in different tables to talk to each other about what should be in such a document. But this was not the only way. I remember the government of Hungary organizing a large meeting of water scholars to help us identify what should be the targets and goals in Goal 6. And so we had a lot of different approaches, but most importantly, it required the world's largest public search for ideas. So there were so many emails, faxes, face-to-face conversations, telephone calls made in the global south, millions organized by UNDP and various other agencies to identify what do people want. And in fact, for example, most young people worldwide wanted a job. And that is why we got eventually number 8, decent work, because people didn't expect that to come up as one of the key global issues. And at the same time, the way this was negotiated at the UN was also very novel, because normally countries sit alphabetically. And here what they basically said was that countries had to sit in groups, a northern country with a southern country, if possible, and they would have to negotiate amongst themselves first before they took the floor. And this was a really unique way of negotiating. So it was sort of a co-creation within the UN system. And then we came up with these 17 goals. But these 17 goals basically talk about, for example, social goals. So there should be no hunger, there should be everybody who should have food, everybody should have education, etc. In this particular diagram, what we're trying to show is if in the year 2019, before COVID, so if in the year 2019, the world existed the way it does today, but you did a thought experiment and you provided everyone below the minimum with a certain amount of food, water, energy, and infrastructure, a very minimum. I'm talking about 3 lamps and a refrigerator, a house the size of a parking lot. So it's really quite small. And if you were to provide it, and we had 2 levels. One level was just dignity, and the second level was escape from poverty. Dignity is lower than escape from poverty. If you provided that, then you would go into the yellow and the pink zone. So basically, in 2019, the existing global pressure in terms of nitrogen emissions, phosphorus, land use, water, and climate change are given in blue. That's the pressure in 2019. If you gave people who were below the poverty line access to just those 4 resources, then you would go up into that orange level. And if you gave them escape from poverty, then you would go into the pink level. So you can see that it's impossible if the blue is already outside the green, so outside the safe and just space. If it is already outside that, then providing these resources to the poorest of the world will take us way outside the boundaries. Now, you might come back and say there are too many people on Earth. Maybe. But the point here is that if you were to provide these poor people what they needed, that's equivalent to about what the top 4% of the world emit. So it's really a question of massive inequality. So when all of us talk and all businesses say, okay, let's try and meet the SDGs and we'll do a little bit of poverty on the side, remember, it's not really poverty on the side, it's really about restructuring the way the whole world lives. And while the 2030 agenda on the SDGs was really very, very useful in terms of saying what 70 goals would unite all of us, it didn't actually deal with the inequality issues. I'm really happy that there is a goal on inequality, but it doesn't tell us how we're going to operationalize that and in terms of which areas, and which countries, which groups of people, etc. And so you find that even that document, which is fairly systemic, is fairly fragmented. So my argument is that I think that coherence in global governance is an illusion. It's not going to be possible. Because sectoral approaches have been the norm throughout the world, we have tried integrated approaches, integrated water resource management, integrated solid waste management, integrated pesticide management. We have so many integrated management approaches, but most of these have been fairly, I would say, sectoral, and also more or less unable to deal with these problems. And of course, we started with mainstreaming also, mainstream environment, mainstream gender. These things didn't really work out. I have the feeling, but I have not researched it, so this is just my personal feeling, that the moment that we lost the Ministry of Environment in the Netherlands, and environment was then shipped out to different ministries, our focus on environmental issues disappeared. That's my feeling. I don't know whether you all agree with me. And it's not a scientific view because it's not based on research. Anyway, and the other problem is that when you open it up to a discussion at the global level, you'll have to have massive participation. And when you're trying to solve these problems globally, it'll be really difficult to get all these people to discuss together to solve the problem. You'll also have massive power struggles, and only those who have significant amount of power, both in communication but also wealth-wise, to be able to participate will influence these debates. And of course, we all have different discourses, and there's competition between these discourses. So there are a number of reasons why I think that if you really want a systemic solution at the global level, that's not going to happen. And for that reason, I think a constitution is necessary at the global level. And what does a constitution imply? It would imply that it would include goals, so it could build on the SDGs. It would have principles. It could build on the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. It would have rights of countries, so it could incorporate a lot of the materials from the human rights documents. It would have responsibilities for everyone, including business. And business, banks, pension funds, philanthropies. I'm mentioning a few that I think don't normally get included in discussions on responsibility. And we would also say that this would sort of provide a framework within which the market could function. Let's take technologies. Today, all kinds of technologies are being developed. Let's take something simple, cosmetics. Most of these technologies are tested for your face, but they are not tested for the moment when you wash off your face and it gets into the water system. Coffee, we drink a lot of coffee. How does that pollute the water system? So those are the simple stuff. But then, of course, you have artificial intelligence, you've got medicines, you've got all kinds of other technologies that are continuously being launched. And the question is, how do we ensure that these technologies do not cause harm? And that's why I think that we have to come up with a constitution which says it's okay if you develop the technology, it's okay if you have the tested for certain reasons, but if your technology eventually leads to massive harm to people, you're going to be held accountable. So it sort of tries to create a balance. And I think this is really important because let's take plastics. You know, when you develop a little bit of plastic, you use a bit of plastic, it's not a problem. When we use plastic as we use today, it's a huge, huge problem. Now the question is, to what extent should the plastic companies also be held responsible for a technology that is both useful but also problematic? And they make profit, so maybe they should be the ones who should clean up the oceans. So we have to try to figure out how do we deal with this kind of issue. Also, predictability. All of us want to know that we live in a predictable world. And if you have the rule of law at the global level, then you know that if you do something that's inappropriate, you will be held accountable. Let me give you the example of how economists try to calculate cost-benefit analysis for companies and countries. They never take into account that if you cause harm to other countries elsewhere, you may have to pay damages. They never take that into account, and then it's very easy to say, I make a lot of profit from using fossil fuels. But if they had to account for the possible damages that they had to pay to those countries, then the equation that they have in front of them is more complicated. Then they might think, let's not invest in fossil fuels. So we're trying to change the system a little bit through this constitution. A constitution prevents forum shopping. I don't know whether you're familiar with this concept, but very often you have countries who don't like the way the negotiations are going within a particular forum, and then they move out of that forum and they take the topic elsewhere. I have a number of examples of that, but I will move that for later. The other thing is that we have treaties that are hard law, but then gradually they're treated like soft law. And they become, because countries are unwilling to implement them. And so somehow you find that people are trying to soften the legal system at the global level to weaken it. And I think you could try to weaken the law, but you can't try to weaken the constitution. Of course, you will probably come back and ask me, how do we make such a constitution work? And that's the next question. And I think it's sort of a preemptive geopolitical pragmatism to have this global constitution. All of us, I think, in this room live in countries which has a national constitution. And that basically protects all of us. It enables us to live in a society where you don't run too many risks. But at the global level, we do not have a constitution. And that's why I think that's important. And one could base it on an idea of Earth system justice. This is a paper we recently published in Nature Sustainability, but also in Environmental Politics. So in two different types of arenas, trying to build on the knowledge and of different types of disciplines. So basically, our argument is conservative justice is not going to do the trick. We need to go beyond conservative justice towards transformative justice. And we need to have recognition justice. Recognition justice is when you look at justice from the perspective of the most vulnerable or the marginalized communities. Also, epistemic justice, which is that you're not just looking at peer-reviewed literature, but you're also looking at how indigenous communities look at knowledge, how local communities, different parts of the world look at it. So you're trying to create something that is sort of universally legitimate. And then you look at three I's: interspecies justice and earth system stability, the right of other species to live, the right of the system to be relatively stable, to enable other species to function. Intergenerational justice, so the rights of the today's population with respect to the past, and today's population with respect to the future. And intragenerational is between generations. And then you have a number of procedural justice, which is like access to civic rights, like protesting, or access to courts. And you have a just minimum access, and then you have substantive justice, which is ensuring that everybody has access to a minimum and allocating the remainder of the resources that we have. And finally, you have a sort of a system, and then you have just minimum access targets for people building on the SDGs. But you also have a just no significant harm, that we cannot cause harm to large numbers of people without taking this into account, that you will be taken to court and be held accountable for that. And then amongst our other areas, what I would really like to emphasize is that you cannot solve these systemic problems by addressing the symptoms. You have to address the underlying causes. For example, the pursuit of GDP is a big problem. And when we classify countries into low income, middle income, high income, low income countries want to be middle income want to be high income, and when you are very high income, like in the Netherlands, you don't want to fall down the ladder. This creates the impression that all of us should focus on increasing GDP. And GDP itself is a concept that is out of date. And so the question is, how can we reorganize our global system in such a way? So I'm thinking in as systemic a way as possible, and I think a constitution is possibly a systemic solution. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation.
Great, thank you so much. That's both very interesting and a little scary. I think we've got some time for questions. Is there anyone already who has a question they'd like to ask Joyeeta? I'm sure there must be. There we go. Both of you, yeah.
Nice workshop on statues. We'll have a nice workshop on statues on Thursday.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so be there Thursday.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. My name is Mieke van der Bijl-Brouwer. I work at TU Delft at the Systemic Design Lab. Like many people here, I'm a designer. I'm super interested to hear more about this idea of a global constitution and how people like you from other disciplines kind of think about these complex challenges we're facing in the world. I was wondering if you have any ideas about how we as designers can maybe contribute to this bigger goal of this global constitution.
What a lovely idea. I think that, when you start with a narrative about a constitution, so I'll go to the procedure, and then that's where you could have perhaps a role to play. I think first you have to design it. So a number of experts will probably go to different constitutions worldwide to see what people want within their country. And if you want that for your own people, why would you not want it for people elsewhere? So, I mean, you try to create sort of proxy indicators of legitimacy, and so you try to create a constitution that may be acceptable to people worldwide. Once you've got the design ready, the next question is marketing. And in terms of marketing, one big thing we've learned in global governance is that when we did the 1992 Agenda 21, that was a very fat book, nobody read it. And now we have the 2030 Agenda, which is basically Twitterable messages. You all probably know those signs of the SDGs. And I think if somebody could help me design a sign for a constitution, and maybe for some of their different elements within that constitution, that would be great.
I feel like you're in the right place for that. So
I'm in the right place.
Who knows?
And she's only very far, she's only about within 10 kilometers from where I am sometimes. So.
Interesting. Yeah, okay, what about you? Oh, okay. I'll hold it.
Oh, you hold it. I'm not touching. Remco van der Lucht, professor of co-design, Hogeschool Utrecht, University of Applied Sciences Utrecht. I have a short question, and that is how you promised to say something about that, and you didn't yet.
Yeah. So as I first said, step one is to design it on paper. Step two is to get some degree of support from scientists in different parts of the world, that this could match with their country's interests and with their country's values. Step three then, I mean, the way you get a global system is you have to get one country to raise their hand during a General Assembly meeting to say, what about a global constitution? So let's say the Netherlands raises their hand or I could get maybe Bangladesh or India or somebody like that to raise their hand and say, what about a global constitution? When they raise their hand, there has to be at least a great majority of the other nations who need to put their hand up and say, we would like such a constitution. So that means that I need to try to make sure I have contacted all the small island states, because they are very badly affected by climate change, and for them a constitution is really important. Small island states, around 40 countries, least developing countries, another 40 countries, 80 countries. If I can persuade India, where I come from, We might be difficult, but if I can persuade them, now that's one vote, but many people. And then if you can get the EU, then you've got enough votes in the room to start the process. And when they start the process, they always start with a draft. And maybe if you're lucky, they'll take the draft that we hand over to them. And then they'll negotiate for the next 30 years. The goal is, see, in 2045, we got the 1945, we got the UN Charter. So if by 2045 we get the global constitution, it's too late for climate change, but at least we can avoid other things. But maybe we can even push it earlier. I really think we've wasted too much time on even this 1 degree issue, you know. Scientists in the 1990s had already said that below 1 degree, it's green for everybody. Between 1 degree and 2 degrees, it's orange, which was really, you should worry. And you know, if you go to a traffic light, the orange is really short. And then it's red. So red is longer and green is longer. So the orange, there was 1 to 2, and then beyond 2 degrees, it was really dangerous. That was already said by Dutch scholars in the early 1990s. And somehow everybody concluded, oh, but 1 to 2 is too expensive, let's go for 2 and above. And so, you know, there were models that were designed for 3.5 degrees in the United States. And that's crazy. And, you know, to get to 2 degrees took us so long. And then now the small island states said eventually, but 2 degrees will not protect us, we want 1.5. And so the agreement in Paris was go for 2 degrees and if possible as low as 1.5. But even 1 won't protect the small islands for a long time, and because the sea level continues to rise for the next 1,000 years. So we really have to be very careful. And it took so much time, and also you could hardly get money for that kind of research.
Yeah. Perhaps any questions in the back? Maybe possible. We've got a question here in the front. Yeah. Oh. Okay.
Hello, Anja Overdiek, Professor of Applied Sciences in Rotterdam and The Hague. Thank you very much for this idea, this approach, and also the intricate explanation of the justice and interspecies justice in it. I really like it, but as a co-design professor, I think it's a very top-down approach. I feel it's really a very top-down approach, which doesn't take account of that systems are emergent, that regions or groups, communities of people have very different ways to achieve goals. So I was wondering if you could translate some of these constitutional goals into change of paradigms, change of values people would need to embrace to get there, because that is something we can design with.
Oh, sorry. So on the issue of top-down, so the Earth Commission work is basically 50 authors from different parts of the world covering different disciplines. And none of us, we basically did a review of the scholarship. And then we tried to create a story around the scholarship. So it's not top-down, bottom-up in the sense that we've asked people yet what they think. It's just, and anyway, it's also, it's just a paper. It's not a policy, it's just a scientific paper. On the issue of the Constitution, even that, it's, at this moment, it's just an idea. There are many constitutional scholars who are pushing for global constitutions, but they have different motivations. They are thinking from the perspective of law only. This constitution is trying to link up all these different systemic, environmental, and social issues within the Constitution. Now, the question that you raise about changing values, some values don't need to change. Let's take the value of not causing harm. It's a key idea in Islamic law, in Hindu law, in indigenous communities, in Roman law. Roman law is the start of our system. Every single international treaty used to say we should not cause harm to others till the climate change treaty. And then they dropped the article on do not cause harm to others. It's a political decision. We are causing harm to others, let's not pay for it. I mean, this is, so we're not changing values. The only value we're trying to change is the other person is just as valuable as I am. So you'll find that in many countries, we treat our own citizens very nicely. We don't treat the foreigner as nicely. We don't treat the migrant as nicely. We don't treat the asylum seeker as nicely, right? And we often don't even want the people in other countries to have the same rights as we have. And that's the only value I want to change, you know, that you want to, if it is tens of millions of Dutch people or Europeans who are dying from climate change, believe me, we would have fought for 0.8 degrees centigrade. It was simply because in our mind, it was somebody else, somewhere far away. And now it's coming into Europe because we are getting the forest fires in Portugal and France, in Canada. It's coming back into the north. So we will also suffer. But the problem is that as long as we see it as something far away, as a Bangladeshi that suffers or an Indian, it doesn't matter. In terms of a top-down constitution, I think any treaty that we make always has to have a draft for discussion. There's a draft, and then, of course, people tear it apart. They'll say, you know, from my perspective, this doesn't make sense. And somebody else will say, this makes sense. So there will be a lot of discussion. But there always has to be a draft on the table before a discussion, negotiation can take place between countries. And I think what I would like to do is a two-step approach. But I don't have the resources to go into a global survey kind of approach. So the two way I can do it is we can draft it based on the scholarship in those countries, based on their constitutions. We can share it to scholars in those countries to see if they will be willing to accept. And then as a design, and then we will move it to the center. But you'll find that the no harm principle is the one that they will attack. And that's the one they want for themselves. They don't want somebody to harm themselves.
Yeah, pretty grim how that can work sometimes. We have time for one more question. I saw you with your hand up earlier, so you're the lucky one.
Hi, I'm Andre Wening, and I'm a designer. And as a designer, I'm interested in root causes of problems. And I was wondering, you're talking about fragmented governance, and I was thinking, what do you think is the root cause of that problem? How did it came so far after billions of years of evolution? We have fragmented governance.
But we have fragmented governance in the tiny country of the Netherlands. We have so many ministries, each ministry makes its own policies. It's absolutely impossible to have a systemic solution, one law to cover everything. It's impossible. There's no way. Maybe you can make a model or AI could design something, but I don't think it's at all possible for you to get a systemic story. Don't forget, we all live in democracy, so our laws are based on negotiations between members of the parliament, and they will talk per topic. No one in the Netherlands is discussing climate change, water, all the environmental issues, all the social issues. They're not in the same ministry. They're all separate. And if you look at hospitals and education, they don't even take into account very often their environmental aspects. And if you look at the 17 goals of the SDGs, it includes the right to hospitals, so we need to include how much hospital waste there is in hospitals, how much energy they use, education, conferences like this. It's impossible to regulate all that with one document. Forget it, not possible. But a constitution could lay the principles.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for both your talk and the Q&A. I believe we have a present for you. Oh, stop. We've got something to thank you. Thank you very much. It's a Dutch treat and a soap. Very sustainable. Thank you. Thank you. We'll have a short break soon, and afterwards the workshops will start. And I'll explain a little bit how the workshops work. There will be 6 workshops. They'll all focus on a sustainable and circular society. And you can see them here and where you'll need to be. Now, I can imagine you might like to attend multiple workshops or You can't choose. That's a thing, choice paralysis. But if you're not able to get a ticket, because there will be tickets to your workshop of preference, don't worry about it, because after the workshops, we'll come back here and reflect on what we did and learned during the workshops. And there'll also be time to ask questions about the other workshops. So you can get a ticket in a little bit in the back of the room. And after the break, we'll start at 10:30 sharp. And I think that's all you need to know for now. So enjoy your break.